Professor once opened his apartment to students on Friday afternoon. They would sit on the Burgundy institution furniture, drink coffee, and talk about things like theological implication of universe expanding. They would watch art films in TV lounge and argue them late into the night. He was never pedantic. He sat in a circle with his student and knock as they spoke. When someone tested a new idea, he would just say more. And he was affably erudite. One of those students watched all of this and thought, that's life. Getting paid to pursue knowledge, art, and wisdom and handing on to a generation is eager for it. He decided that he was going to be that professor. It took years. After his PhD, he couldn't find an academic job right away. He worked in a weather parking booth. He read Kierkegaard's Between Cars. And every day he sat in the driver's seat of the Volvo or BMWs who belonged to the tenured professor he desperately wanted to become. He loved it. Not because the job was meaningful, it was just rent money. But his boss treated him well, the work was easy, and nobody pretended the job was his whole life. Then he got it, a tenure-track theology position in Pennsylvania. He packed his box of books and jacket, and he had arrived. Years later, same man, same career. He is sitting in his car in the parking lot of Prairie State College. His class doesn't start until 2 in the afternoon. His jaw is clenched shut, hands are gripping the steering wheel. Every part of his body is telling him to run. He forced himself inside. He stands behind a podium, not sitting in a circle, not nodding. He doesn't bother to ask them to participate. He has never felt so stupid in his life. He arrived at the exact opposite of the life he had glimpsed. The professor he wanted to become, affably erudite, sitting in a circle, inviting ideas, and the professor he actually become were two completely different people. What happened? That didn't happen overnight. Nobody goes from packing jacket with excitement to gripping a steering wheel in the parking lot because one bad semester. He described it later, the morning waking up with one thought, not this again. Just a flat, heavy dread sitting on his chest. And the exhaustion was so deep that some morning he would get up and make it 2 hours into the day and have to go back to sleep. Most people at this point would blame themselves. Not sleep enough, not eating right, not exercising, and he probably did that too. Because from the outside, none of this looked like anything more than a rough patch. But something was already happening. The body has a system for handling stress. Under normal condition, it is remarkably good at its job. Something dangerous happens, the system fires, somehow you survive, and then it brings itself back down. But his stress wasn't coming and going. It was every time he walked into the building, every time he stood behind that podium. Same demands day after day, month after month. Over time, the system was supposed to bring him back down, stop doing its job. Not because it was broken, but because it was never designed to run this long. His sleep, his energy, his ability to recover from anything, the system was stuck in a gear it couldn't get out of. It was not a rough patch. It was chronic stress. And that's the ground where everything that happened to him next grew from. He wasn't the only one. Researchers have been studying what this does to people for decades. Burnout doesn't just show up as exhaustion. Maslach was still teaching, still showing up every morning, still standing in front of the classroom. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, something has quietly shifted. The thing the work used to give him, the sense that it meant something, the small feeling at the end of the day, the effort was worth it. They all stopped coming back. In a study on burnout in psychotherapists, one participant described it this way. By the end of the day, I felt utterly drained. It was like my body couldn't keep up anymore. And Maslach calls it emotional exhaustion. Across the same studies, the pattern keeps showing up. Persistent tiredness that rest doesn't touch. The headache that comes and stays, the unexpected weight loss, sleep that has stopped doing what sleep is supposed to do. You have probably had some version of this conversation. Someone close to you says they have been tired for months. You said, same. And you both laugh a little. Everyone you know is tired. It's baseline. And that's what makes it so easy to miss. None of it feels like burnout. It feels like a rough patch. In a study from Yancheng Clinical Medical School in China, operating room nurse described what this transition actually felt like from the inside. One of them said, "In the beginning, I might felt a short-lived of accomplishment, but as effort and reward become disproportionate, my emotions shifted from positive to resentment." She is describing a slow drain. That's the part people don't see coming. You can push through losing satisfaction, you can push through losing motivation, but when the energy itself starting to go, something else changed with it. The things that would normally help you recover start to feel like demands. For example, maybe you used to come home and cook, now you stare at the kitchen and order something. You used to go out for runs, now even the idea of putting the shoes on felt like a major commitment. The doctor's appointment you have been managing to make, you will do it next month. They are how the body actually restocks. But exhaustion turned every single one of them into a demanding task on the to-do list. So you stop one by one. The things that will help you are the first things to go. And what replaced them isn't rest. It's a collapse. You go home, you sit down, you scroll, not because it feels good. Matter of fact, a lot of people are reporting that felt extremely bad afterwards. Instead, we do it because it's the only thing that doesn't ask anything of you. Maslach knows exactly what that felt like. After his worst days, he would come home and lie down in bed for hours in the middle of the afternoon. Beers and ice cream, same music video on repeat, Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush for hours, not because it felt good, because it was the only thing that doesn't ask anything of him. So here's the question I keep coming back to while I'm researching this. If someone is exhausted, truly deeply exhausted, why can't they just sleep it off? That's what we do when we're tired. Muscle recover after sleep, the mental fatigue phase after rest. Sleep fixes lots of things, but people in burnout describe something different. They rest and they wake up more exhausted than before. 8 hours sleep in bed feel like they barely slept. The tiredness won't clear. The reason is the same system we talked about earlier. When the stress response is stuck running, hormones that keep you alert and reactive stay elevated into the night, right when your body needs to wind down. The signal is initiate deep restorative sleep gets blocked, so the sleep you're counting on to restore you isn't doing what sleep is supposed to do. Researchers measured actual brain activity in people with burnout found something striking. They were waking briefly, often too short to remember, significantly more often than healthy control. Short enough to unnoticed, frequent enough to interrupt the deep sleep that does the real restorative work. And unlike people under lower stress, whose sleep quality bounce back on the day off, you tell yourself you should have gone to bed earlier or cut the screen time. You look for things you did wrong, but the research is saying something different. The sleep wasn't restoring you, not because you slept wrong, because the machinery that turns sleep into recovery had been running in the wrong gear for too long. The tiredness that won't lift, the headache, the weight loss without trying, the hobby you stop doing, the sleep doesn't do its job. They are the same system telling you the same thing in every language it knows. The body has been spending what it doesn't have, and this is only one part of what burnout does. The next part is harder to see and harder to talk about. Something else has been changed in Maslach. His student wasn't interested in the sheer pleasure of theatrical thoughts. They just wanted to become accountants or athlete trainer. And their lack of interest started to feel personal, like a rebuke to everything that mattered to him. His temper grew shorter. He began having irrational, angry reaction to fairly ordinary challenges. He wasn't sitting in a circle anymore. He was standing behind a podium, lecturing at people he was stopped seeing as students, and Maslach called this dimension depersonalization. The moment when people around you start being people and start becoming obstacle, problem, or files to close. There's a story a doctor told once that I haven't been able to shake. She was describing a shift where her entire family was brought in after a car accident. Parents, children, none of them made it. She said she went home that night, sat down with her friends, and told the whole story, every detail, in the same tone that she would use to order food. Flat, calm, completely disconnected. Her friends were in tears, but she wasn't. And the thing that stayed with her wasn't the loss. It was the realization that she couldn't feel it. That's what depersonalization is. Not an action of caring, the inability to feel it. There's a friend who hasn't called back in weeks. Not because anything happened, but because the conversation could cost something that you're not sure you have. The client used to genuinely care about starting to feel like a case number. You catch yourself in the mirror and feel slightly disconnected from the person looking back. Nothing dramatic, just something off. So how does someone who chose a job specifically because they cared and end up unable to feel what they supposed to feel? Psychologists call this emotional labor, the performance of managing how you appear regardless of what you're actually feeling, but bridging the gap costs something every time. When the stress response hasn't come back down in a month, and the cost of maintaining that performance become enormous. You're not just doing the job. You're spending physical energy performing a vision of yourself the job expected. At some point, the bridge stopped holding. And this is the part that matters. It is not a choice. The brain doesn't decide to stop caring. It runs out a resource that caring requires. What looks like from outside, like a detachment, coldness, that's the system trying to survive by cutting what it can no longer afford. In 2014, a team led by Sensei Tai brought a group of nurses into a fMRI scanner and showed them video clip of people in physical pain. They tracked the regions associated with empathy, then they mapped the activation against each nurse's burnout score. The higher the burnout, the weaker the response. A measurable, significant reduction in neural activation when witnessing another person suffer. And here is a detail that changed everything. The nurses with the weakest response weren't the ones said they stopped caring. Many of them insisted they still care. They still want to, but what they reported feeling and what their brain was actually generating had come apart. The caring was still there as an intention. The system behind it has worn down. That's not someone who switched off. That's somebody who tried for too long. And here is where it gets harder. Because the brain doesn't clock out when you do. When your partner wants to talk, when your kids want your attention, when somebody asks how you're doing and actually meant it. The distance you build to survive the day follows you home. Westman followed over 100 couples where one partner in high stress occupation and found that burnout in one partner was directly linked to burnout in the other. The strain wasn't just being carried home, it was transferred. Maslach spoke about this later, about the importance of not foisting his own BS onto his children because of his career trauma. The distance he built to survive the classroom didn't stay in the classroom. It followed him into every relationship that needed him to show up as a person and not as a function. Because the part that was supposed to generate feeling has been running under capacity for so long that this is just what normal feels like now. That's another thing burnout takes. The energy and now the ability to feel, be present, and to be engaging. And this one doesn't show at all. It happens entirely inside someone's head. And the person it's happening to is often the last one to know. Maslach called this dimension reduced personal accomplishment. You can still be hitting every deadline. Your boss can tell you directly that your work is good, and some part of you listening will quietly assume they are just being kind. Maybe that they haven't looked closely enough yet. Reality keeps telling you you are fine, and some part of you has stopped being able to hear it. That belief, that quiet sense when you are trying to do something and it worked. Researcher Albert Bandura spent a career mapping what holds this up. What he found was 4 sources. The most important one is direct evidence. You try something and it worked, and you walked away with that same internal sense of that you did it. Over the years, stacking up those moments give you that professional confidence. But when that stress response has been running for too long, that reward system, the one that produced the feeling of I did it, wears down. The winning moment keep happening in the outside world. They just stop happening inside of you. After Maslach's worst lecture, the one where he couldn't get 20-year-old to have an opinion about a music video, his department chair walked past them towards the door and said, "Things didn't go as badly as I thought they did." He knew it was over. He had become the exact antithesis of the professor he admired. And when the ground underneath a belief gets worn down from every direction, the mind does what the mind do. It writes a story. The good thing in my career wasn't really me. They were just luck, or timing, or people being kind. And one day someone is going to look closely and figure out I'm not who everyone think I am. That's imposter syndrome. And in people already worn down by burnout, it takes hold because there is nothing left in the room to argue with it. The evidence has been worn away. The people feel far away, unopposed. The stories start to feel true. And this is where something shifts that the first 2 dimensions doesn't touch. It stopped being about the work. It becomes about who you are. During the time that Maslach was at the university, he carried this intense guilt that he had come to hate a highly rewarded, secure job. Tenure is what academics spent decades pursuing, and he had it. He couldn't stand it. The guilt is shame pretending to be self-criticism, and that is the signature of this stage. Not the sense that you have fallen short at a job, but rather the sense that you have fallen short at being the person you thought you could have been or should have been. That's why it hides so well. Shame keeps people away from asking help. This is also the reason why coming back from this is harder than coming back from the other 2 dimensions. Because the belief in yourself doesn't return from time off. It comes back the way it was built, slowly through doing something and feeling the result of it. The problem is that the part of you that's supposed to feel the result is the exact part burnout worn down. So you can do good work and not feel it. You can hear good words and not trust them. You can recover some of your energy and still wake up unsure whether you are someone who can do this. Maslach quit a week after that lecture. His colleague congratulated him, which tells you everything about the system does to people still inside of it. He moved to Texas with his wife and started over. When I started to work on this, I had 3 things to explain. Somewhere along the way, something clicked. Those are 3 things. They are one thing. Showing up in 3 different places, they are all indicator for the one thing. When the part that's supposed to bring you back down stop working, the cost doesn't stay in one place. It show up in your energy, it show up in how close you can get to the people around you. It shows up in whether you still can trust yourself to do the work. 3 surfaces, one system that never got to rest. A man dreaming about his life, what it could have been, and ended up gripping steering wheel in a parking lot, unable to face a room full of students, not because he stopped caring, because the system that let a person care has been running without rest for too long, that it started shutting down the things it could no longer afford. And if you have seen yourself in any of this, in the sleep that doesn't restore you, in the people who you used to care about now feels like another demand, in the praise that you can quite believe, there is the specific things you might be telling yourself right now, that something in you is broken, what the science actually says. Your stress system worked. It did exactly what it's designed to do. Your brain, under demands that would wear down any brain, protects you the way it was built to. It dialed down empathy, it dulls the reward signal, it pulls the resource from anything it decided was non-essential. That's the system doing its job in condition it was never meant to run in. You are not broken, you are worn down. And those are not the same thing. You now have a language for something you probably have been feeling alone for a long time. That's not a small thing. The machinery is knowable, which means it's changeable. We will get to that. But for now, just this. Whatever shape burnout has taken in your body, your brain, or the way you see yourself, it's not a verdict on who you are.